Good afternoon, everyone, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and especially a warm welcome to all our friends, visitors from overseas. I hope you had a good stay in Singapore, and we are so thrilled, so honored that you are back here again, joining us for ICCS 2025. I think we should give all our friends from overseas a really warm round of applause. And so here we are. 3 fruitful days have just flown by, and today, now, all too soon, we are at the close of the 3rd edition of ICCS. A little bit bittersweet because we've had a great 3 days, but as with all good things, it comes to an end. Actually, it is not an end. It is just the beginning. It is the beginning of building on the friendships and the networks that you've formed here, the knowledge that you've exchanged, what you can do when you bring it back to your home countries, in your own communities, what you can do to expand on the learning and the thought leadership that we've developed here, and how much more we can impact community and touch people's lives. All of that, I believe, starts at ICCS, in the conversations that you've had, in the plenary sessions that you've enjoyed, and in the thoughtful speeches that we've heard. So I hope that we can go back there and make this just the start of impact on all of our communities, wherever we come from. Since the last conference, just 3 years ago, I think the world has become a more uncertain place, and dare I say, a more fragile place. We have seen the rise of conflicts. Sometimes they are simmering conflicts, sometimes they erupt violently, sadly, but violently. Trade tensions have disrupted economies. Digital disinformation has spread rapidly across borders at breakneck speed, and even faster with each iteration of the social media and technology. And social fissures deepen within and between nations. Sometimes people take very emotive fault lines because they are the weakest link in society, and they press them hard, and they use those as weapons. So the challenge to peace and harmony, I think, is real. It is pressing. Yet, despite all of this, the fact that standing up here today, and I see all of you present, ICCS's strong showing this year, our many thought-provoking speeches, the engaging, the lively plenary sessions, and more importantly, all the networks that you've built and enhanced, all of this demonstrates our collective determination that despite what is happening around the world, despite the conflicts that we see, and despite the tensions and fault lines that people take advantage of, we are here determined not just to talk about the difficulties, but to find ways to act on them, not merely to coexist or even just to be content with being tolerant of differences, but to build genuine bonds across these differences and to seek to celebrate diversity as a virtue amongst all of us. And it shows indeed that we are committed to nurturing cohesive societies as the foundation of resilient futures. One theme that has reverberated throughout almost every keynote, every address that we've heard, and I heard that earlier in the lively exchange, is that cohesion does not happen by chance. It will not, it cannot, and I think we have to assume that we have to work really hard at doing it, which means that cohesion demands intentionality. It must be deliberate, it must be front of mind, it must be something we are conscious of, and we must organize ourselves around it. And it requires what I call intentional multiculturalism, something that's not left to chance, cannot be built by chance. Let me explain a little bit more what I mean by sketching out what social cohesion means to me personally, sharing some of the Singapore experience, and also drawing on the very many thoughtful speeches that I've heard over the last few days. Social cohesion, we've heard that word so many times, to me means something that knits a diverse society into a shared community. And as I said, it doesn't exist as a natural state. In fact, our most primal instincts tell us to look for people who are similar to us. We hang out with people who look like us, speak like us, share our beliefs, and basically are a reflection of ourselves in identity and fundamentally in our thought process. And so therefore, you can't assume that when you leave a country alone, you leave a society alone, you leave a community to chance that something cohesive will materialize, especially when you have a diverse group of people with different interests, different faiths, different backgrounds. We must work very hard at it, and this is painstaking work, and I think we all know there can be no substitute. But if we get it right, we can build shared norms with common hopes and aspirations and be in a position to create an environment where people don't just tolerate one another, but we embrace one another. We truly live, we interact, and we deepen friendships across communities in everyday life. And I want to emphasize the key is in everyday life. It is actually quite easy to do it on special occasions, on festivals, on the New Year occasions where things are fun. You get to dress up in baju, in nice clothes, you visit. That's the easy part. But can we do it and sustain it every day in, day out, whether there's a special occasion or otherwise? And I believe that this year's theme, Cohesive Societies, Resilient Futures, really captures this essence very aptly, because it's in a cohesive society that we will find a resilient future. At the same time, true cohesion and societal harmony cannot be the product of a single silver bullet. Why not? Well, very simply put, we are dealing with individuals. We are dealing with emotions, with beliefs, with sentiments. We are dealing with people who come from different heritage, a different sense of cultural norms, and a lot of deep history. It is also multifaceted because no two communities can ever be alike. It is also constantly evolving across different generations. And earlier on, we heard one of the speakers here speak about intergenerational communication. And I think that's really important as a foundational touch point of building true cohesion. Cohesion also touches on the deepest identities and beliefs that people hold dear. And this is really very visceral, very personal, something that we hold deep and true to our very second nature of our identity. Indeed, many speakers over the last 3 days have reminded us that managing this diversity and being able to stitch it into a cohesive unit is very complicated. It involves navigating differences that are often deeply rooted, as I said, in history, culture, and faith. And we're also reminded that at the core of a cohesive society or a community, we speak of society and community as a collective plural. But actually, what we're talking about is an individual. At the core of every society we want to bring together, every community, are people like you and I. People with their own hopes, their own fears, their own dreams, their own aspirations. So even as we address macro issues, which are important, policies and platforms that promote cohesion, we can ill afford to ignore the micro, the thoughts, the sentiments, the individuality behind what we want to do. And we have to try and learn to see issues through the lens of the other person. And more importantly, in a diverse community, through the lens of the minority community. It is easy to see it through the lens of the majority community. But can we ask ourselves every once in a while to look at a perspective, look at an issue from the lens of someone who fits within the minority profile of any particular community? And I would say that if we can do that, then we have the best possible chance of shaping the lived experience of that individual, which matters a great deal. What they feel, how they see, how they feel valued in the community, the role they play, the role they can play, how they're looked up to, all of that are very important constituent elements to building a socially cohesive society. And therefore, spaces, daily rituals, things that we do on a daily basis, as I said, outside of special occasions, that foster interaction and build understanding, they are really important. As are programs that are organized in a community that deliberately bring people together through platforms that are otherwise very innocuous looking, arts, heritage, culture, sports. All of these are platforms that bring people together with no other agenda. But through the natural formation of teams, of friendship, of communities, you learn to bridge gaps, you learn to see across divides using these platforms. Or even if you ignore the platforms, what about the spontaneous occasions, the shared coffee breaks, which I'm sure you had many of, the neighborhood festivals, or just bumping into someone while you're walking your dog in the park, or bringing your children to the playground, all these micro interactions are really important and cannot be ignored as we strive to build a socially cohesive society. And the point I want to leave you with, I heard just now Dr. Maniam say, what is the one point you won't forget? Well, my one point is this: there is no one size fits all. It is different, and we must respect the differences, and we must see through the collective whole and identify the individual in order to build a socially cohesive community. This year's conference takes place in a special year for Singapore. We are celebrating our 60th year of independence. It is a real milestone in our nation's journey to build a cohesive, multicultural society. But at the same time, it is also an opportunity for all of us, in Singapore especially, to reflect on that journey, to ask ourselves how we have come here, how far we have come, what more we can do to make it SG 100 and beyond, and what are the steps we need to take as a society collectively to be on that path. I believe that multiculturalism lies at the heart of the Singapore story. 60 years ago, as a newly independent nation with a highly diverse population, we were very conscious of our differences, but we decided to form the country that embraced the differences, not in spite of, but because of the differences, to make ourselves stronger. We consciously adopted multiculturalism as a key core value that we would live by. Some of our rules, our laws, our constitution have provisions that deal with what we do, how we treat a minority population in our country. And so we became an independent nation of people with very different ethnicities, religion, cultural practices. And we decided that we would not build a national identity by assimilating all of these into one, but we wanted to keep those individual intrinsic qualities of diversity, different communities and having different characteristics, and we layer on top of that our national identity. So it is a Singaporean identity, but below that, we respect, we embrace, and we have learned to truly appreciate the differences that exist below the surface as a fellow Singaporean. And so we grow this thinking throughout what we have done in our policies and in our practices. It is to integrate the groups to help them to live closer together, and as a result, I believe Singapore has become home to a real kaleidoscope of different ethnicities, religions, languages, and I'm so proud to call this my home. But the question for us is, as an international community, how do we keep this going? With the challenges that we've heard, many speeches have touched on it earlier this week. How do we navigate these challenges? How do we evolve the concept of multiculturalism to take on board today's challenges, the tensions that lie today, with the advent of social media and powered by technology? Well, I've got a couple of short observations to share with you. First, I believe we must always work on a basis, as I started by saying, and I'm sorry I keep repeating myself, but such an important point, that multiculturalism is not a natural state. It is never assured, and we have to work hard at it. And we must always assume it to be a constant work in progress, and something that we are ever so anxious about that we might lose. We must always glance behind us, behind our backs, and wonder whether it could be taken away from us. And we must always have that slight nervousness about it, and then we will seek to really jealously guard it and protect it. Second, I believe we need leadership and citizen support in tandem, hand in hand. It can't be one without the other. No policy alone will ever work, and no community without policy and frameworks can work. Government policies are useful, and they put in place the framework, but it has to be the people who breathe life into these ideals, who practice them every day, and as I said, show us what their lived experience is. And on this, I believe we will have to accept a degree of social intervention. That social intervention can be quite deeply personal. You've heard some of the stories, and I don't want to repeat it, but you heard what I think my colleague Dinesh spoke about, how we integrated living spaces. Why? Not because we wanted to make people live together or have to transact in a particular way, but because when you live together, you grow up together, the children play together, you eat together at hawker centers, side by side, elbow to elbow at a shared space, at a common table. And you learn to see across the divides. You learn that that is your lived experience. That is what I mean by everyday, day-to-day lived experience, not just on special occasions. So that social intervention can be quite deeply personal, where we live, how we live, all of that existing within a policy framework to maintain harmony within a community. And I think that's really important. Third, in public spaces, both offline as well as online, I think there has to be responsibility and accountability for what we say. Sometimes the most divided of conflicts starts with mere words. Pope Leo, when he was first elected, after the conclave, he had a dialogue with, I believe it was all the ambassadors, the diplomatic enclave. And amongst his first speeches, the one phrase that struck a chord with me was this. He said, and I quote, "For words too, not only weapons, can wound and even kill." And when I had a brief opportunity to chat with him, when I met with him at the Vatican, he said, many conflicts today start with just a disagreement by words. And it quickly escalates into something that becomes an armed conflict, and sometimes you can see it becomes prolonged. So I believe we could all be a lot more mindful and have a care about what we say, in particular about hateful speech. Sometimes this will mean sacrificing our own desire to be able to say what we want about anything we want, wherever we want, in favor of being more sensitive and caring about the impact this can have on the person next to us. And if you go back a few minutes ago when I said, what happens when you walk into a room where you are not the majority in that room and your views are not taken into account and speeches are made or comments are made that denigrates the minority? That's hurtful. That's how sometimes conflicts can start. This, I believe, if we are more mindful, will lead to a more open, honest public discourse based on facts and not hate and not disinformation. Fourth point, the responsibility to shape and nurture this cohesive society, the society of the future, will increasingly fall on the shoulders of our young people, our young leaders, our young advocates. And I think Alex just now demonstrated what it meant to him, because he literally stood up to be counted. And I think that's what we need our young people to do. At ICCS, this year, I'm delighted to see over 200 young leaders joining us, nearly double from the previous conference. And I think this is a very significant factoid from this ICCS, that we have more youthful participation, more of our young people are engaged, more people have signed up for the YLP, which, by the way, goes on till this Saturday. And I want to give you all a very big shout out. Thank you very much for being here and for taking the lead. And more importantly, you're not just here to be participants. You've been actively working with us to co-create this program, to think what would matter, how would we deliver the message, how do we design the sessions. And many of you have led conversations. You've given us your perspective, your views, and led those conversations. You've had a critical role in shaping future conversations as well. And as I heard earlier just now, and was a point that I wanted to make quite deliberately in my speech, you play a big role in being able to shape and build that intergenerational dialogue, that intergenerational bonding. Because it's one thing to connect with people of your own generation, but it's much harder to do so across different generations. And trust me, one day you will get there when you are the senior generation and you think, what is this music that they're listening to? What is this language that they're speaking? I don't understand it. I look it up at Google and it doesn't really help me. So I use my children to help me translate. But one day you will be there. So that intergenerational bonding and the cohesion is equally important. I want to just cite, while I'm here, some inspiring examples from the ICCS alumni, from our young people. So I'm told that Winwin from Malaysia founded Jelajah Harmony Sebarang Jaya. It's a youth-led initiative bringing participants to visit multiple different places of worship, understanding what goes on in a place of worship that is not of your own religion, your own faith, fostering a first-hand appreciation of this diversity, and in many ways playing a very important role to demystify. Very often you are worried and anxious about something you don't know, you don't understand. So the first step to harmony and cohesion is to understand, to see, to know, and then understand, and it breaks that barrier. How many of us will be able to criticize a friend from a minority, even if that person is from the minority? Because that person is someone you know well, you hold dear to, you understand, you know, you speak to this person, you understand his or her challenges. It is much harder to do so. So it is always better to start with understanding, and I think the efforts that Winman has made has played a big part in shaping this. And also, from the Philippines, and she's been with us several years now, Ariza Nokam from the Philippines created Champions for Peace, helping to train youths to address social and environmental fragilities in their own communities. I think this is, it's a challenge to do so because it's never easy to look at social and environmental issues, but to look at it across the religious divide, across the different ethnicities as well, and to develop thought leadership around it, to rally, to lead. All of these are really great examples of how our young people from ICCS, India alumni, have done us so proud. And I thank all of you for being here, for taking the lead, and for really carrying on with this messaging even outside of the ICCS. These stories underscore the power of our young people to transform societies from the ground up. And in your hands, I believe you have the power to be able to transcend those conversations and to build stronger thought leadership that leads us into the future of cohesive societies. Finally, my last thought on this: how do we approach cohesion building? I mean, we speak about this in theory, we understand what a cohesive society looks like, but how do you and I play a part in doing this? How do we all approach these conversations if and when we are approached? I believe that our approach must always be with an open heart, always prepared to see across differences, willing to foster shared ideas and build hopes with people who might look, think, speak differently from ourselves. I spent almost 5 years in my previous role as the Minister for Culture, Community and Youth. 5, to me, very, very fulfilling years. And this part of the work has been deeply personal for me. In a world that is increasingly shaped by polarization, by division, where we see value, tremendous value in building civic spaces, both online and offline, where dialogues can take root across faiths, sectors, across different generations, across different ethnicities, and through that to build trust. And one more thing, we should never weaponize race and religion. We should never do that. It's so easy to do, but its impact is so long-lasting and it breaks the trust that we all seek to foster. And to me, this is why ICCS matters. We come together as an open community, we share ideas, we develop a common resolve to do better in each of our own communities. It also helps us to sharpen our instinct, to listen more carefully, to collaborate more deeply, and to reach beyond just the familiar. Because today's world is not just defined by geographical boundaries. It is a global village connected by technology and trade, and yet, sadly, very often divided by suspicion and fear. So we must find a way, even as we part company after today, to go back to our own communities and have that shared thought leadership on how we build a cohesive society across the world. Finally, in closing, as I reflect on Singapore's 60 years and ICCS's growth, I return to a few what I regard as simple truths. Cohesion and harmony, they are not abstract ideals. They are tangible, very tangible objectives. They are lived commitments. They are made in everyday choices. Like I said, every day, day in, day out, where we work, live, and play. Cohesion and harmony is also forged in the willingness to listen, to understand, and that open heart to reach across divides. They're built in spaces, both big and small, from national policies to neighborhood conversations, and as I said, from grand celebrations to the smallest acts of kindness for your neighbor as you see him or her at the lift lobby or at the corridor where you live. But they do require courage, patience, and above all, I believe, a certain intentionality and deliberateness to what we want to foster. I'm pleased to say that at ICCS 2025, we have witnessed this spirit. Together we have shared stories, we have shared ideas, and we have discussed solutions. And now as we go back to our own communities, our own countries, our continents, I hope that we can carry this spirit with us. May we all be inspired to work actively and intentionally across multicultural societies where difference and diversity is a strength and not a threat, where every individual's identity is respected and every person's voice is heard, and then cohesion can become the bedrock of resilient futures for all of us. Thank you very much.